Welcome to EDU 6490. After this week, we will only have 3 more weeks, so press on towards the goal because we are almost to the finish line. Today we will be looking at the research method, case study. Many of you might be wondering what case study research is and how it differs from other forms of research. This presentation will give you an overview of what case study research is, how it differs from other forms of research, and what methods are used to conduct this type of research. What is case study research? The first thing that needs to be done is to provide a proper definition of what case means. A working definition of case is a strategy of doing research which involves an empirical investigation of a particular contemporary phenomenon within its real-life context using multiple sources of evidence. Now I understand that's a huge definition, so let's break it apart and explain each section so that you can understand what case study research really is. First thing to point out is a phenomenon. All of you know the word phenomenon, but in case study research, it's something that cannot be explained through normal research methods. So you have to use case study research to figure out what might be causing the problem or what could be the reasoning for what's going on. Because it can't be explained, and others have tried to explain it using other methods. So this method is to explain some type of phenomenon. So what this means is, when someone wants to research a case, the researcher is trying to find out what happened in a bounded system, or how or why something happened. A bounded system is a closed system that places focus on one area of study, which means it focuses in on one case. We'll explain case a little bit later and what bounded system is a little bit later. More details on both you'll see here in a minute. It's important to know that case study research is qualitative research, which gives insight into why there might be a problem or why there might not be a problem. It basically paves the way for researchers to make a hypothesis for later quantitative research. Qualitative means it's narrative, like you don't know what's going on, so it gives you reasons and opinions and stuff like that about what's going on. Quantitative will have numbers and factors and graphs and stuff. You can see like, oh, well, there was an increase here, so that you can put a number on it. Whereas qualitative, you can't. So in case study research, it's a lot harder to do this type of research because you can't quantify it through you can't put a quantity on it. That's what makes it difficult to do this type of research. Some examples of what you could do for cases would be to study an individual, a small group, a program like an after-school program. Does it work? If it does, why are all these students failing their standardized tests? So you'll have to study the case. You could study a team. Why are they so much better? Of course, Brazil is one of the best soccer teams in the world. Why is that? So you could study the team. You could also study things like a site. Let's say you're doing a development to your buildings, and for some reason there's a problem, and you can't figure out what the problem is, so you'll study this site. You could also study an entire village. I mean, the possibilities are endless for the things you could study. So basically, that's what a case is. A group of people, an individual, and so on. I think that's pretty clear at this point. Next thing to do is to define the case. We already know the case could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing. To figure out what's going on. Why is this happening? So here's an example of a case. First thing you need to define is the who. Here's an example. The who will be Saudis between the ages of 15 and 30. The what will be Saudis between these ages with type 2 diabetes. So first thing that bounds the system, the ages of 15 to 30. The second thing that bounds them is that they have diabetes. The next thing is to define the where. The where is Saudis who presently reside in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So anybody inside the kingdom between 15 to 30 with type 2 diabetes, they are part of the case. If they're Saudis who are outside of the country, they don't count. The when is not necessarily so important for bounding this case because we're already talking about where, what, and who. The last part is the why. Why are we going to study this group? What is the point? So the why is they share something in common. What do they share in common? They all have type 2 diabetes. So share the same characteristic of being the largest population with type 2 diabetes. So that is why this group is being studied. So that's how we define a case. It's just a simple example to show you one way you could go about starting a case study research project. Characteristics of case study research. There's three main characteristics. Another way to look at case study research is that it is particular. It means it's focused on a situation or event, a bounded system. It's descriptive, the narration of the particular. So we're studying the particular, the situation, the event, the case, and then we're going to narrate what's going on in that case for the problem or why something's not happening. Now, last thing is, this type of research, the characteristic is heuristic, which means it's self-learning, self-awareness. It means you're learning it by studying it for yourself. So basically, heuristic enables a person to discover or learn something for themselves. So case study research looks for ways to explain why certain situations are the way they are. It provides insights, reasons, and opinions on why the situation is the way it is or not the way it is. It's simple as that. So going back to our case study on type 2 diabetes in Saudis between the ages of 15 and 30, this type of case study is trying to determine reasons and opinions as to why most type 2 diabetes cases are in this group. So that's why this would be a good type of case study research project. You could do something like that with this. When do you use case study research? There are two main reasons when we use it. The first reason is to answer some form of descriptive question. Here are two examples. What factors contribute to why XYZ University is offering online courses? And how do teachers from XYZ school deal with stress? What factors influence their choices? So one, we're bounding the system by what? XYZ University. That binds it to just that university. So that's one study. That's keeping it within that group. So both examples show that the case is bounded, as I just explained, to XY University to find out why it is offering more online courses and what is determining teacher choice to cope with stress. So those two things are factoring into why we want to know why, and we can't figure it out in any other way, so we're going to study them. The second main reason why people use case study research is you want to study a process. In both examples, which are the same as the first two, but we're changing them to processes, what happened in the process of offering more online courses and what happened in the process of dealing with stress. So when you study a process, you may be able to find a specific area to strategize as to why this is changing and to why that is changing. It's not 100%, but it helps you to develop strategies to see why they're making this choice over that choice, or why they're offering more online courses now and not before. So you could implement new strategies into both. That's why a process is good in a case study research, so you can find out where something changed, and then you can see the result of that change. And then you can see it in a different section throughout the whole spectrum from the beginning to the end. Hypothesis for case study research. According to Flybergerg, professors often seek to steer novice researchers away from case study research. Why? Because the prevailing thought is that case study research is good for generating a hypothesis, but it is not good for testing a hypothesis. So it's good for generating a hypothesis, but it's poor for testing a hypothesis. But in Flybergerg's own article, he debunks this myth. What that means is he uses a case where occupational medical clinics form a hypothesis that organic solvents cause brain damage to workers working in an environment with high levels of exposure to organic solvents. So that would be the hypothesis. Why are people suffering brain damage from these solvents? So he assumed that if it's happening here, if they're using these same organic solvents somewhere else, the same must be happening to them as well. So he studied another group, separate from the group that was getting brain damage, to determine that his theory, his hypothesis, was true. So he used a logical conclusion to come to a reality of that. By this happening here, he could assume that it was happening there, but he couldn't do it unless he went and did the research. So it's good for generating a hypothesis. It's poor for testing a hypothesis. That's not 100% true, but generally speaking, case study research is just for creating a hypothesis because the data is going to be qualitative. To test that data, it's harder because you can't quantify it, which is why case study research isn't very dependable in some contexts. How to write a hypothesis. As I mentioned in the previous slide, case study research is well suited for generating and testing a hypothesis. This is good because a hypothesis is a testable prediction, prediction. What that means is an educated guess. So what's good about case studies? You're going to guess as to why this is happening. And then you could test that why to see if it's really happening. The downside to this is that it can't be quantified, so you can't put it into numbers. When you can see 200 people have this problem and 5 people don't, you can quantify the numbers that why you can see a specific. So it's more definitive in the conclusion as a theory. So, testable prediction. That's how to write a hypothesis, which is what hypothesis means, educated guess. So, how are you going to test this hypothesis? By doing your case study research on it. So in case study research, the researcher is looking for a cause and effect relationship between independent and dependent variables. So they'll look at this variable and see if it's dependent on something else, and they'll make assumptions and they'll make guesses, and they'll do this until they can come to some logical conclusion that might or might not be the case. So since a hypothesis is looking for this cause and effect relationship between if and then, researchers should write a hypothesis this way. So in the case study mentioned in the previous slide about brain damage and organic solvents, you can see that if high levels of organic solvents are present in a work environment, then the risk of brain damage for workers is more likely. Now then, they could say, well, this should be the case in all other cases, and then they could go and test it if, then. So in the example case study in the textbook regarding the need for teachers to understand the environment of urban students to be effective teachers, the researcher uses an if, then hypothesis statement to test how a teacher training can train future teachers. So a teacher training can train future teachers to be able to impact urban students and communities they find themselves teaching in the future. So they go through teacher training, then they become future teachers, and then they teach students into the communities. So using that, the hypothesis in this case, case study research, can be easily constructed using an if-then statement. So if this happens, then that happens, then you can say, then that's going to happen. So if a teacher trains to be a teacher, and then they go and impact students in the communities, then they find themselves teaching in the future, those students. So it's like teachers teach the students, and the students become the teacher, and so on and so forth and so on. How case studies impact other methods. As mentioned above, case study researches researches a phenomenon not previously known to a researcher. Obviously, it's a phenomenon, so why would you research something you already know? Because the phenomenon is unknown and unresearched, this method of research definitely impacts other methods of research, as mentioned in Lecture 3 by Dr. Watson. Before explaining how case study impacts other research methods, let's look at 3 reasons it impacts other methods. Lecture 3, Research Methods. Dr. Watson explains that a researcher chooses a research method based on 3 areas: the type of question the researcher is asking, the judgment of the researcher, and the method that provides the most useful information. However, it is difficult to formulate questions, make judgments, or investigate methods when not much is known about the phenomenon. So, case study research is unique, means it's a phenomenon. Nobody knows about it. It leads to different knowledge because we don't know about it right now. So you're going to study it, then you gain new information, then it could lead to more information that becomes more concrete, which is the 3rd point. So it's unique phenomenon. Once you know the phenomenon, it leads to different knowledge and new thinking and new insights that further develop into concrete research that is actually proven to work. How case study impacts other methods. The uniqueness of case research does impact other research methods. The lack of knowledge regarding a problem can make it difficult to implement other research methods. Therefore, we have to use case study research. The uniqueness of case study research impacts other methods in 3 ways. Case study research first impacts other methods of research because the researcher and others lack enough knowledge about the topic to use one of the other methods. So we don't know anything. So it lacks knowledge. Secondly, this lack of knowledge makes it difficult to design a questionnaire because you don't know what to ask. We don't know why. So what questions can we ask? We don't know. So it's difficulty designing a questionnaire. And the last thing, finally, it is also difficult to design a quantitative research method because the researcher is unsure of how people will respond to the experimental manipulations. So you can't design it for quantitative research method. It's hard to quantify it, as I've been saying through most of the presentation. How case studies impact other methods. Let's look at what Nolen Zucker says about case research and its impact on other methods. Why case study research leads to new knowledge. Sometimes case study research is the only choice. Nothing else works, so we have to do this. So Zucker says this: there are many considerations prior to embarking on case study method. But at the onset, it should be clear that no other descriptive method is possible or will get the level of description the researcher is looking for except case study method. So you can't get any information using other methods, so you have to use this. This is the only way. It's the only one that will work. Continuing on, how case study impacts other methods. Case study research does lead to more concrete knowledge. It means it's set in stone. The researcher is able to go in and observe, ask questions, and create a narrative. By exploring a phenomenon through observation, questioning, and narration, the new and concrete knowledge could help researchers to perform other methods of research in the future because of the knowledge it creates. So, case study research makes it concrete because then it leads to more research. So the knowledge resonates with readers' experiences because you do the case study, someone reads it, and they're like they have an epiphany, the light bulb goes on in their head, and they start thinking about it's tangible, illuminative, like they start seeing things like the light bulb. They can grasp the concept, and then they can figure, whoa, maybe this is the cause. Then they can go back to what they studied and find out, yep, that was the cause. It is related to the reader's knowledge, experience, and understandings. So if I do one case study on Saudi about them having type 2 diabetes, and I can't determine the factoring as to why that is, if I present some evidences of what I found, someone could go in later and specifically create another test, and then they could pinpoint, this must be it. Maybe it's the food they're eating, or maybe it's genetics, something like that. It helps researchers compare and contrast the case to their own life experiences. So when you see this and you see what you have, you can relate it. So let's say you study a tribe in Africa, let's say the Maasai tribe in Kenya, and you want to see how they live, and then you can compare it to how Americans live, and let's say you want to bridge the gap between the two. So you'll do a case study on both, find the similarities and differences, and bring them together to try and figure out how they can get along. You can do it through language, you can do it through culture, you can do it through religion, food, dress, all kinds of things. And finally, what can happen is it becomes an epistemology of the particular because the reader learns how a case is like and unlike another case. So it distinguishes itself from others. So it concludes which can be drawn from results of this type of research. So you read the case, you come to a conclusion. So, concluding thoughts. Case study is an alternative and creative method of research. It is especially helpful when there is a lack of knowledge regarding the problem being researched. For example, the case study method in Chapter 14 looks to explore how an admin team for a school district reacts when they are forced to cope with multiple innovations. This method of study allows the researcher to go and observe what happens to these school leaders and create a narrative. Other methods of research may not have worked as well. Likewise, case study research is versatile because researchers getting tongue-tied. Likewise, case study research is versatile because researchers from many different disciplines use case studies to dispute, challenge, confirm, and produce new theories to describe and explain a complex real-life situation. So it's alternative, it's creative. explore and describe something that can't be described, or something that hasn't been able to be described before, or something that you really want to know why it's the way it is. Has theoretical implications. So finally, case study research has three theoretical implications. Researchers are able to read case studies and understand how the case applies to their situation. Case studies give a framework on how to deal with a similar situation. Thank you.